It was 11:51 p.m. in my Chicago apartment when my phone lit up with an email from my mother. The subject line held only one word: workshop. My stomach sank as I opened the message. She wrote that she and Kevin had made the decision to sell the workshop to his investors, and she needed me to sign the documents releasing my share from my father's will. She ended it with, "This is for my future." The betrayal hit fast, cold, and without mercy. Before I could even steady myself, another email appeared, this one from a law firm I had never encountered. They announced on Kevin Doyle's behalf an offer of $10,000 for my full and immediate release of every claim connected to the workshop. $10,000 for my father Michael's entire life's work. If you've ever felt like an outsider inside your own family, especially when a loved one's legacy is at risk, you know that strange, hollow feeling that settles in. But I didn't cry or shout. I didn't even feel the flare of anger I expected. Instead, a precise, icy clarity took over. This wasn't a family disagreement. It was attempted theft. I dismissed the insulting offer, and by 12:03 a.m., just 12 minutes after my mother's email, I was calling Robert Chen, my father's closest friend and our longtime family attorney. The call went to voicemail, but I didn't hesitate. I told him it was Venus, apologized for the late hour, and explained that the sale was underway and they were in breach. I instructed him to activate the artisan clauses immediately and freeze every asset and transaction. Then I promised I would be on the first flight to Maine. After hanging up, I opened my laptop, bought a one-way ticket from Chicago to Portland, and accessed my encrypted files. They had made a critical mistake. They believed I was the daughter who ran off to the city and abandoned everything here. They forgot that I was also the architect behind the workshop's expansions. The one who co-signed the original loan when no bank would take my father seriously. The one who drafted plans for the new wing. The one who combed through legal contracts and insisted on adding the artisan clause. The small but iron-strong stipulation that the property could only be used for master-level custom craft, blocking any mass production schemes. I created it as a safeguard to protect my father's art from a world obsessed with speed and cheapness. I never imagined I would need to use it against my own mother. They also conveniently ignored the last 3 years. After my father passed, my mother let the finances fall apart, and the workshop, his legacy, was 2 months from being seized in a tax auction. I received the notice. I didn't scold her or even call. I simply wired $12,000 from my Chicago account and quietly continued paying the taxes each year. They thought I had left them behind, but they were about to meet the partner who never really left at all. And then there was the investment they'd nearly scrubbed out of memory, the $85,000 structural restoration I financed 4 years earlier. My father and I planned it together. He called it the Foundation Project because he knew the old 1940s workshop was deteriorating. The sea air had eaten away at the support beams, and the roof was starting to fail. He was a master boat builder, but engineering wasn't his field. It was mine. I flew home 3 weekends in a row, conducted structural assessments, designed the architectural plans, hired the contractors, and paid every dollar myself. It wasn't charity. It was an investment in the future we were building. I even sent my mother the paid invoices, thinking I was securing her stability, our family's stability. I was naive. I thought I was protecting the workshop from the world, not from the woman who married my father. Early the next morning, while riding in a cab along the cold Maine coastline after landing at the airport, my phone suddenly erupted with an incoming call. It was my mother. I answered, and instead of a greeting, I was met with a panicked, furious scream. "Venus! What did you do?" "What did you do?" Robert Chen froze the accounts. Her voice was so shrill it crackled through the speaker. For a moment, the driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror, startled. I held the phone a few inches from my ear before answering. "Mom, I told you this would happen if you tried to sell the workshop," I said, keeping my voice level. "You and Kevin are attempting to transfer property that doesn't legally belong solely to you." "You're sabotaging me," she shouted. "You're ruining everything Kevin and I planned." "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I took a slow breath, watching the Atlantic waves slam against the jagged rocks outside my window. "I protected Dad's legacy," I said quietly. "Something someone in this family needed to do." There was a furious exhale on the other end. "Venus, you don't understand. Kevin has investors lined up. They were counting on this. You can't just come in and freeze everything. That workshop is mine now, not yours." The confidence in her voice cracked on the last word. I closed my eyes. "Mom, Dad didn't just leave that building to you. He left it to both of us. And he left a legal structure in place. You chose not to read it. You think I care about some stupid clause?" She snapped. "Kevin says we can fight it. His lawyer says," "His lawyer," I cut in, "is the one who offered me $10,000 for a property appraised at nearly $1 million. He does not have your best interest at heart. Silence. Brief. Trembling. Then. You always think you're the smartest person in the room. You always talk down to me. It's not about being smarter, I said. It's about being honest. Another silence, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, lower, almost pleading. Venus, I need that money. I can't keep living like this. I thought Kevin would help, but things have been harder than you know. Something clenched inside my chest, but I didn't let it show. Mom, selling the workshop isn't the answer. You weren't here, she whispered. You left. That doesn't mean I wasn't helping, I said. You just never asked. A beat. Then she snapped again, grasping for control. Well, it doesn't matter now. Kevin says you can't stop the sale forever. He says your tricks won't work. Her voice was frantic, desperation masquerading as confidence. I spoke carefully. Mom, Kevin has been lying to you. The line went dead. No goodbye. No explanation. Just the abrupt click of someone unwilling to hear the truth. The cab slowed as we turned onto the coastal road that led toward the workshop. The building appeared in the distance, a weathered, sprawling structure perched at the edge of the sea, its windows glowing faintly in the early morning light. My father always said it breathed with the tides. As we approached, I saw two unfamiliar cars parked out front. Kevin's investors, of course. I paid the driver and stepped out onto the frozen gravel, the wind cutting straight through my coat. The workshop loomed ahead, the scent of salt and old pine filling my lungs. Inside those walls were decades of everything my father ever loved. I squared my shoulders and walked toward the entrance. If they wanted a fight, they were about to meet the woman Dad had raised. ChatGPT said, Kevin's investors are furious. He's going to lose the deal. You're destroying everything. I kept my voice perfectly level. I'm protecting what Dad built. What Dad built? She scoffed, her voice dripping with a panic I'd never heard before. Dad is gone, Venus. This is about my future, my life. You have your fancy life in Chicago. What do you care? Before I could answer, the phone fumbled. I heard a muffled, angry voice. Kevin, you think you're smart, don't you little brat? His voice was thick with whiskey, even at 9 a.m. You think you can just waltz in here with your lawyer? That workshop is mine. I'm the one who's been running it. Running it into the ground, you mean? I said, the coldness in my own voice surprising me. You'll regret this, he snarled. You're going to get nothing, you hear me? Nothing. The line went dead. I sat there, the phone humming in my hand. The anger still wasn't hot. It was crystalline, precise. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. This time, a notification from Facebook. My grandmother, Susan, had tagged me in a post. It was from my mother, a public post on the small town's community page. It's just so sad, she wrote. When children forget who raised them, when they get so successful and cold-hearted that they would try to steal their own mother's future right out from under her. Please pray for us. We are being attacked by our own family. That was it. That was the moment the last thread of daughterly obligation snapped. She hadn't just chosen him over me. She had chosen him over my father's memory. And she had just given me permission to wage total, uncompromising war. I flew into Portland and met Robert Chen at his office. He wasn't just a lawyer. He was practically my uncle. He was the one who'd held me on his shoulders at the boatyard picnics. Now his face was grim, but his eyes were sharp. Venus, he said, sliding a thick document across his desk. You were right to call. You were smarter at 19 than most people are at 50. He pointed to a paragraph highlighted in yellow. The artisan clause. It's beautiful. The property shall be used exclusively for the purpose of master-level custom craft. Any mass production or sale of prefabricated goods shall be considered a material breach of this deed. Robert leaned back. Kevin Doyle isn't a boat builder. He's a kit assembler. He's been buying cheap fiberglass hulls from overseas and passing them off as Morgan-inspired designs. He isn't creating, he's counterfeiting. The validation was cold, sharp, and satisfying. So, the injunction holds, I said. It wasn't a question. It holds, Robert confirmed. But to win the lawsuit, we need to prove damages, not just breach of contract, but desecration of the legacy the clause was designed to protect. Then we need to do an audit, I said, my voice all architect, all business. A legal audit. We drove to the workshop, my childhood home. I hadn't been back in 4 years, not since before Kevin. The house itself looked neglected, the custom trim Dad had milled himself peeling, the garden replaced with gravel, but it was the workshop that made my blood run cold. Kevin was there, standing by the bay doors, a beer in his hand. He smirked when he saw me. The conquering hero returns. Come to see what a real business looks like? I ignored him, my eyes scanning the room. I felt like I was walking through a crime scene. Where is it? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Where's what? The lathe. Dad's workbench. The one he built from the salvaged mast of the Albatross. Kevin gestured with his beer toward a pile of scrap wood in the corner. That old piece of junk rotted out. Had to tear it out. Made space for the new finishing station. He pointed to a cheap particle board table stained with sloppy varnish. I pulled out my phone. Not to cry, not to scream. I opened the camera. "Robert," I said, my voice clinical, "please document." I began my audit. My father's hand-forged tools, the ones his father gave him, were gone from the wall, replaced with cheap, plastic-handled power tools. The pegboard where he'd outlined each tool in black marker was empty. The beautiful exposed oak beams overhead, the ones I'd helped him sand and oil, were covered in a thick, hideous coat of gray paint. And in the main bay, where the half-finished hull of a custom schooner had sat for a decade, my father's unfinished masterpiece, it was gone. In its place were 3 identical fiberglass motorboat shells, the cheap kits Robert mentioned. The air smelled of toxic resin and chemical solvents, not sawdust and cedar. This wasn't neglect. This was extermination. "He's not just in breach of contract," I said to Robert, loud enough for Kevin to hear. I photographed the sloppy paint, the damaged floor where the workbench had been ripped out. "He's committing fraud. Stolen craft. He's using my father's name, Morgan Boats, to sell this garbage." Kevin's face went purple. "You can't prove a damn thing. This is progress." "We'll see," I said, turning to Robert. "Get a full accounting. I want to know where every one of my father's original blueprints are, and I want to know where every penny from the sale of his tools went. You should have taken the $10,000, Kevin. I thought the fight was about the artisan clause. I thought I was just fighting a con man over a breach of contract. I was wrong. It was so much worse." That evening, Robert called me at my hotel. His voice was different, shaken. "Venus, I found it. It's not just a breach. It's criminal." "What do you mean?" I asked. "The $85,000 restoration loan," he said tightly. "The money you wired 4 years ago. It never went to the contractors." Kevin intercepted it. I couldn't breathe. "He stole it?" "He did one better," Robert said, disgusted. "He convinced your mother to pay the contractors from her own savings, telling her it was a short-term cash flow issue. Then he took your $85,000 and used it to pay off his personal gambling debts. But that's not even the worst part. He used the cleared property, the one you had just invested in, to take out a new $85,000 business loan. He mortgaged your father's legacy all over again." "But he can't," I said, my mind racing. "I'm co-owner. I never signed anything." "He forged your mother's signature on the loan documents," Robert said quietly. "And Venus, the bank records show he tried to forge yours too. They flagged the signature mismatch, which is why he had to go to a private lender. The intent is there. This is bank fraud, forgery, larceny." The floor fell out from under me. This wasn't about cheap fiberglass. This was a systematic plot to gut our family and sell its bones. "How?" I whispered. "How could she let this happen? How could she be so blind?" Robert sighed. "She wasn't blind, Venus. She was trapped. It's called emotional dependency." He was right. When my father died, he didn't just leave a hole in her life. He left a void of validation. She didn't just lose a husband. She lost her sense of self. Then Kevin arrived, charming, attentive, making her feel seen again. By the time the mask slipped, by the time the drinking and the bad investments started, she was already too deep. Her fear of being alone was stronger than her fear of him. He isolated her, convinced her I didn't care. It wasn't stupidity. It was learned helplessness. Understanding that didn't make forgiving her any easier. "He didn't just defraud a bank," I said to Robert, the cold clarity returning. "He preyed on a grieving widow. He targeted my family." "Venus, what are you asking me to do?" "File it," I said. "All of it. The breach of contract, the civil suit, the criminal complaint for forgery and fraud. Send it to the district attorney. No more negotiations." The final confrontation came days later. Robert, the local sheriff, and I pulled up to the workshop. Kevin and Jennifer were there, trying to load equipment and boat kits onto a trailer before the injunction arrived. "You can't be here!" Kevin shouted. "This is my property." "It was never your business," I said, holding up the document. "It was his." I showed him the highlighted clause. "You violated it the second you brought this garbage here. You've been in breach for 3 years. My mother ran from the house sobbing. "Venus, please don't do this. We'll lose everything. The house, the workshop. Kevin was trying to build us a future." "This," I said, gesturing to the fiberglass hulls, "is not a future. It's desecration." She grabbed my arm. "If you ever loved me, do this for me. Do it for your mother." I looked into her eyes, and for the first time I didn't see my mother. I saw a stranger. "I'm not doing this to you, Jennifer," I said, my voice like steel. "I'm doing this for Dad." I turned to the sheriff and handed him the second folder. This is the injunction. And this, I said, tapping the binder, is the criminal complaint. Fraud, forgery, theft of an $85,000 loan. Kevin's face drained. The sheriff read him his rights as Kevin screamed and cursed, threatening to burn everything down before I'd get it. My mother collapsed, sobbing in the gravel. I didn't look at her. I turned toward the workshop, the empty space where my father's bench once stood, and whispered, "Goodbye, Jennifer." Then I drove away. Kevin was convicted on all counts. Fraud, forgery, larceny. The town turned on him. The papers called him the con man who tried to steal the Morgan legacy. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison. My mother wasn't charged. The DA saw her as a victim of financial and emotional abuse. She moved in with her sister and started therapy. Our relationship isn't fixed. I don't know if it ever will be. But it's not gone. I spent the next month in Maine. Not in the house, but in the workshop. We stripped the gray paint from the oak beams, tore out the particle board tables, scrubbed away the stains. On the last day, while sweeping under the floorboards, my broom hit something solid, a loose plank. I pried it up. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was my father's tool roll, his hand-forged chisels, custom-handled mallets, and brass marking gauge. Kevin hadn't sold them. He just hadn't been smart enough to find them. I sat on the dusty floor holding the cold steel and finally cried. For years, I'd carried guilt for leaving, believing I was the cold daughter who abandoned her family. But sitting there with my father's tools in my hands, I realized the truth. Sometimes leaving isn't abandonment. It's self-preservation. It's not running away. It's running toward the version of yourself strong enough to come back and fight. My distance wasn't weakness. It was training. I stood and walked to the one surviving workbench, the drafting table my father and I built together. I unrolled his original blueprints for the schooner he never finished. The ink was still sharp, and next to them I unrolled my own. The Michael Morgan Institute of Artisan Craft. The workshop was quiet. It was no longer a tomb. It was a foundation. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please hit that like and subscribe button. But more importantly, I want to know what you think. What is real justice? Is it punishment or is it restoration? Let me know in the comments. I read all of them and would love to hear your perspective.